Hi, Chris Mihulka here. I've never done this before, but I'm going to do a little kind of a rant here and then some suggestions. I've been looking through a lot of the YouTube videos, and some of the things I see are really, really good. Some of the fly tying, though, has some real problems, and most of it is in fly design. Now, I worked for about 10 years dealing with the top fly designers in the world, basically. And I've worked about 20 years on my own, designing flies, working with other people's designs, and helping get things reproduced. So I've got a few suggestions for people out there. They're going to try to design their own new patterns. So I guess I'm going to do this video in two parts. The rant first, and then the suggestions. So just bear with me on the rant part, and we'll get to some good stuff. These are CDC feathers. Probably one of the most well-designed, whether you believe your God designed them or evolution designed them, feathers that there are. They sit next to the preen gland on a duck, under their wing. Now the duck gets oil from these because they sit right at the base of the oil gland, the preen gland. Oil seeps out through these feathers. The duck reaches down with his bill, gets oil on them, and then runs it through his other feathers. And this is how they waterproof themselves so they float. So of all the feathers there are, this feather is the most well-designed floating feather there is. Now, what I'm seeing on a lot of YouTube videos, and this is what bothers me and brings this rant about, is people are tying these in as wet fly hackle, soft hackles, or they're taking and pulling them all up and using them as a post on a parachute. The fly is designed to lay flat on the surface and float. Now the reason I know this, I tie a lot of CDC. I tie dark dun, I tie light dun, I tie strike indicators, and so these are the primary CDC feathers I use. You haven't ever bought CDC like this before? Well, I told you I tie a lot of feathers. I've worked with a lot of CDs, so take my word for it. Use feathers the way they're intended. Let me show you here on CDC. This is an example for proper tying techniques and using the proper materials. Here's a CDC feather. Now it floats on the surface of the water because it has, on all these little bitty stems that come out, all these little fibers, there are little tiny barbs that rest in the surface film of the water, just like any insect you'd see sitting on the surface. It doesn't break the surface film, so it stays afloat. Also, CDC all through the feather, from where it comes from on the bird, was treated with gland oil from the bird, so it's basically a waterproof feather. So this is a great thing to use in flies where it rests on the surface film. Now, a CDC feather, even if you fish it a lot and you get it wet and you break the surface film and you get it to sink, all you have to do is wick the moisture out of it. Renee Harrop from House of Harrop sells this neat little buckskin, smoke-tanned buckskin patch. The interior of it is very soft, and all you have to do is put your fly in the interior of that, squeeze a little bit, pull your fly through it, and it wicks the moisture right back out of that CDC feather. So now a little bit of air, that feather's just about good as new and ready to go back, if it's in a fly, back into the river and fish. And it will stay afloat for, several more casts or a bunch more casts, or until you catch a fish that really goos it back up. Finish drying it off a little bit, and it floats again. You don't have to apply a lot of floatance to this feather to keep it on the surface. So some things like CDC, they need to be used in a particular fashion on a fly to be not only properly used, but be the most effective in your fly design. So now you know why CDC feathers work so well in floating applications. Use them as a strike indicator. Use them as the feather under the wing on a CDC caddis. Where you've got a nice dubbed body, a deer hair wing, the CDC feather goes under it, sits in the surface film and supports the fly. If you're tying it in as a soft hackle, it's going to get matted up and sink. And like it's supposed to for a soft tackle, it's going to have no movement because it's such a soft fiber in the water. So it's pointless. It's just a mat below the surface, basically a pellet fly, which if you want to fish a pellet fly, that's fine. If you tie it as a post sticking straight up on a parachute fly, it does no good whatsoever because it's sticking straight up in the air and not riding in the surface film. It may be pretty, but there are a lot better things to use as posts that will be easier to see, will be more durable through multiple fish, and will help hold your hackle better. So if you're designing flies, let me make some suggestions for you on reading materials. Now these are just things I have and I've read, and I think they're really good books to help you learn. Now, if you're designing your own fly patterns, there are tips in these books that will be invaluable to you. You'll be able to design a better fly that will work better, imitate the bug better, and hopefully help you catch a lot more fish. One of my favorites that I enjoy reading a lot is Tying and Fishing the Fuzzy Nymph. Now, for those of you that don't know Polly Rossborough, Polly was an old guy who lived in southern Oregon on the Williamson River. Polly's kind of credited with being the first person to dub bodies with fur on flies and really give good-looking nymph patterns that look like they have a lot of life. He's also one of the first people to use a dubbing loop, and this book will show you how to dub furs, when to dub furs, and why you should do it. So it's an older book. Polly's been gone for quite a few years now, but Tying and Fishing the Fuzzy Nymph by Polly Rossborough. More contemporary, modern, an extremely good book, Designing Trout Flies by Gary Borger. Gary is a scientist, a great guy, extremely good fisherman, and he has studied insects through his teachings in biology at different universities, multiple classes, Federation conclaves, you name it, Gary has been there. This book, Designing Trout Flies, tells you why he designs his flies the way he does, what they're meant to imitate, and why he uses the materials he uses to do that. Now, Gary is a more impressionistic tyer than like Polly Rossborough is, but Gary's books will give you really good insight on why you use materials in particular styles. Next, another really nice guy that's no longer with us. This book, The Dry Fly, Gary LaFontaine. Gary lived in Deer Lodge, Idaho, fished the Yellowstone region and all over there. His book tells you, this particular book at least, tells you how to design and why he designed dry flies the way he did and how they imitate the different stages of insects. So, The Dry Fly, Gary LaFontaine, extremely good book if you're going to design dry flies. Now, to help you match your bugs you're designing with insects that will give you a really good impressionistic look, Dave Whitlock's Aquatic Guide to Trout Foods. This book will tell you what the different types of bugs and things are in your area, and terrestrials, crawdads, that kind of thing, are not in your area, but in rivers and lakes, and give you ideas on patterns on how to match those. If you follow some of Dave's examples on what he's designed, tweak them a little bit with different materials or color variations to fit your area, this book will help you catch fish almost anywhere. So another very good read, Dave Whitlock's Guide to Aquatic Trout Foods. The only other I can suggest, I don't have books on hand, is especially if you're tying small flies, CDC flies, and things for Yellowstone, is anything by Renee Harrop. Renee has a really nice lodge on the Henry's Fork at Last Chance, Idaho. He also has House of Harrop Flies, where he sells beautiful flies. If you're going to the Yellowstone region to fish, I would suggest, if you've never tied small and delicate emergers and things, buy some flies from House of Harrop. They will get you fish in that region, and Renee really knows what he's doing. Grew up in that area, very nice guy, very nice family, and I've had the pleasure of fishing with him a couple times. So any of his flies or anything he has written will also be a very good help on designing flies for your own use in your own areas. So I hope you put up with my rant. I hope you take some of the suggestions on the books I've told you about. And I'd like to see some